Hi, welcome everybody. My name is Margaret Ross, and it's my immense honor to introduce tonight's reader, Phan. Thank you all for coming out on this final night of the Phoenix Poets Festival, and thank you especially to Starsha Gill, whose expertise and hard work has made everything happen this week. Just to give you all a sense of how this will go, I'm going to briefly introduce Haidong, and then we'll get to hear him read poems, after which there'll be a Q&A. And I'll start that portion off with a couple of questions, but we really want to open it out. So if a question comes into your mind as you're listening to the poems, hold on to it and know there'll be a chance to ask it very soon. Haidong Phan is the author of Reenactments, published by Sarah Band in 2019, and the translator of Phan Yen Hao's selected volume of poems, Paper Bells, published by the Song Cave in 2020. His work has appeared in Best American Poetry in The New Yorker, among many other journals, and has been awarded the Frederick Bach Prize from Poetry Magazine and the Emerging Writer Award from New England Review. Phan is the recipient of fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Breadloaf Writers Conference, and the American Literary Translators Association. He holds a PhD in Literary Studies from the University of Wisconsin and MFA in Creative Writing from the University of Florida, and currently teaches at Grinnell College while living in Iowa City. An essay Haidong Phan published last year includes 2 sentences by Rilke, which describe what it feels like to read Phan's poems. Quote, "I am learning to see. Everything enters into me more deeply and no longer stops where it once used to." Phan's essay is about learning to birdwatch, a process that requires anyone, but maybe especially a poet, to abandon what they think they know about one of the oldest lyric figures in literature and seek out the particular, often elusive movements of specific creatures. Learning to see. To refuse the generic image, the familiar metaphor of the bird, and see, as Phan does, a baffling fall warbler feeding drowsily in the shrubs. See the gray-brown dusky profile standing upright, a terracotta robin. Dante's allegorical dark wood becomes a patch of real soil in Warren County, Illinois. Writes Phan, "In the middle of my life, I found myself in an edge habitat." These are lines from recent poems, but Haidong Phan has been teaching us to see since his first chapbook, Small Wars, which takes its title from a series by the great photographer Anh My Le depicting Vietnam War reenactors in the American South. Phan's chapbook and subsequent debut collection, Reenactments, include many vital poems in conversation with Le's photographs, ekphrases which are also inquiries into questions of sight, scale, distortion, exposure. In a magnificent essay on Anh My Le's work, Phan describes a formative encounter. Quote, "I think back now to the first photograph of Anh My Le's that I ever saw hanging in a gallery. It was Rescue from Small Wars. 4 soldiers surround and secure a recreated crash site where an actual Vietnam-era attack airplane stands, its unbroken windshield slid partially open, the pilot slumped over the side. What I found so arresting and touching in ways that were difficult for me to articulate at the time were the pine trees framing the scene. Their black boughs, the fine needles etched against the white haze of the smoke. I could almost smell the scent of pine mixed with the smoke of the grenade, touch the soft, fine needles, and feel them spring back into place. I knew similar stands of pine from boyhood haunts in Wisconsin woods. At first seeming to adorn a fantasy of military rescue, the pines ultimately pointed to a truth in the landscape, placing me back in my own American scenes. Those pine trees form an active frame. They disturb the stated subject of the picture they surround, pushing the eye to move outward and inward, to see past, to see through. Haidong Phan's own poems work through many such frames, not only in his sweeping lyric interrogations of American imperialism and the ongoing legacies of the Vietnam War, but in poems that close read single images and scenes until they open out onto multiple narratives. One poem annotates annotations made by the poet's father in an old Norton anthology. In another, the poet's mother describes their family's escape as refugees from Vietnam in 1981, while the poet, too young then to remember, remembers sentences written about Syrian refugees in 2015. Throughout reenactments, Phan intersperses his translations of contemporary Vietnamese poets among his own poems, breaking the conventional frame of a poetry collection, making room for a more complicated shape. I've been speaking as precisely as I can about Hai Dong Phan's work, but what I love most about his poems is a quality I can't name. I could attempt to call it their vitality, their intricate sensibility, but none of those words are exact. Only Rilke gets close. Reading them, everything enters into me more deeply and no longer stops where it used to. Please join me in welcoming Hai Dong Phan.
Thank you so much, Margaret. I'm very moved and touched by your intro and words. I really stop everything I do when I see a poem by Margaret. So it's real. It's in keeping with these last three. I don't know how long it's been. These days of the Poetry Festival, they've really been restorative of all the brilliant and beautiful poetry that's being shared by Dong Lee, Annalise Gelman, poets who are new to me, and also Katie Peterson's work, and Rosette Kala, Margaret, and Vijay. So it's been wonderful. I thought I would read some poems from fragments that Margaret spoke of, translations from Paper Bell, and some bird poems. Small Wars. It was my turn to play dead, so I zipped up my flight suit and monkeyed into the cockpit. Larry, Tobias, and Tim formed the commando unit. Alfredo got the shaft again and played Charlie all by himself. Wasting no time, they slipped back into the woods like ghost soldiers and waited for the signal. Sunlight bombed the forest floor. I pulled the pin on the smoke grenade, tossed it under a tremendous wing, then slumped over my aircraft like a limp rag doll. In minutes, the shooting began. All hell broke loose as planned. Someone sprayed blanks into the enemy trees, laying cover for the others. I could hear the branches and twigs snapping under the boots of my rescuers. Someone radioed for helicopters and phantom jets that would never materialize. Pine cones dropped from great invisible heights. Black smoke seeped into my eyes and blood rushed to my head and dangling arms. A giant cicada singed the air with its emergency song, "Too late, too late." When I came to, the stars in my dream jungle burned like sodium flares. So that poem and this next poem are ekphrases of the photographer An Millet that was referenced in the intro, a Vietnamese American contemporary photographer who uses 19th century strategies like those giant field cameras to capture dudes reenacting the Vietnam War in Virginia, which gave me a kind of a way into my own poetry. A brief history of reenactment. On day one, the photographer walks into camp and immediately starts shooting. She shoots us at breakfast, eating our sea rations, in our hammocks, reading Stars and Stripes. She shoots us in her sleep. When we first cross paths at the creek, she says, "Hello, tiger. Nice combat boots. Is that thing real?" Pointing to my Special Forces jungle shirt. "I'm afraid so," I say nonchalantly, trying to mask my satisfaction. Day 2. No more messing around. The photographer has agreed to join the action. So what's the scenario? A lone gorilla left over in a booby-trapped village jumps out of a hidey hole and ambushes the platoon on a search and destroy. Good thing I brought my black pajamas and sandals. What a trooper. She also plays the captured prisoner, the native informant, and the beautiful turncoat. The sniper girl is her favorite role because it's like taking pictures. The beauty, her voice volleys spookily from behind some rocks as she picks off one of my men after another. Sometimes the photographer shoots herself. I know she has her own personal baggage. Later I find her sobbing in the bamboo grove. I tell her, it's okay, these wars only last 3 days. What will you do when it's all over, she asks. I don't know, I say. Plan the next one. On day 3, after another routine patrol, we sit together on my favorite log in the shade of oaks and devise more scenarios. The topo map unfolds across her lap like a magic carpet. Unfolds across our laps like a magic carpet. She's got killer bangs above camera eyes. I mark all the dangers and landing zones. She speaks of controlled light and the hole that opens up when you press the shutter button. At 2400, our hands nearly touch. There was a meteor shower. I call in mortar fire. I pursued a PhD in English literature at UW-Madison, and I was writing a dissertation on the literature after the Vietnam War, and sometime during this period I had to get a Christmas present for my parents and went to a antique shop and I ended up finding a nice botanical print for my mom. But there was also as these things happen, there was like a NVA flag hanging there, and also a Vietnamese phrase book, a language book, published by the Department of the U.S. Army, published in 1962. So for U.S. soldiers to use when they were in Vietnam. So this poem is all found language. Initial encounter with locals. 1. Enter the village alone. The password is. Each individual must know these passwords. Select the most able-bodied messengers. Promise. Hurry. Swear. We'll wait. All of you will wait. 2. Come with me to the orchard. Don't be afraid. We are friends. Have a cigarette. Are you afraid? Why? Of whom? What? You certainly read our leaflets. 3. What is the name of that mountain? Which color is the most recognizable from a distance? From what spot could we have a better view? What are the usual questions? Who usually comes to this forest? 4. We cannot see from here what we wish to observe. We need an open place, a meadow, field, plateau. It must be far away. Do you know of any such place? We will pay for everything. 5. Point on the map. We will call it the drop zone. Take care of this map. We cannot give you another. Here's my watch. When shall we see you again? Good luck. This next poem about my father's Norton, I owe to my father doing his homework in my first year of teaching college. as a professor, I drove back home to Wisconsin because my parents, after 30-something years of living in Wisconsin, decided that it was too cold and they were going to retire, and they needed me to come and look at the books before they ship them off or sell them or whatever. But so I'd found my dad's old Norton Intro to Literature. You all have seen these Norton Intro anthologies, yeah. So this was like the third edition, 1981, and he was in tech college then, doing computer science, and I was surprised, or had forgotten that he'd taken like a literature class. So, being a good student, he'd written a lot in the margins. So I was poring over this English professor, wannabe poet, and this poem came out. There's a lot of language from him, his marginalia, and poems. I'll try to do the scare quotes, but my father's Norton Introduction to Literature, 3rd edition, 1981. Certain words give him trouble. Cannibals, puzzles, sob, bosom, martyr, deteriorate, shake, astonishes, vexed, ode. These he looks up and studiously annotates in Vietnamese. Ravish means gupdok. Shits is like when you have to đi ỉa. Mourners are those whom we say are full of buông rau. For even the like precurse of feared events, think bao trước. Its thin, translucent pages are webbed with his marginalia, graphite ghosts of a living hand, and the notes often sound just like him. All depend on how look at a thing, he pencils after. I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. His slanted handwriting is generally small but firm and clear. His pencil is a number 2, his preferred highlighter, Arctic blue. I can see my father trying out the tools of literary analysis. He identifies the turning point of the short and happy life of Francis Macomber, underlines the simile in both the old man and the child stared ahead as if they were awaiting an apparition. My father, as he reads, continues to notice relevant passages and to register significant reactions, but increasingly sorts out his ideas in English, shaking off those Vietnamese glosses. 1981 was the same year we vượt biển and came to America, where my father took intro lit for fun, comp sci for job. Stopping by woods on a snowy evening, he murmurs something about the dark side of life, how awful it can be, as I begin to track silence and signal to a cold source. Reading Ransom's Bells for John Whiteside's Daughter, a poem about a young girl's death, as my father notes. How could he not have been vexed at her brown study lying so primly propped? Since he never properly observed, I realize this just now, his own daughter's wake. Lấy làm ngạc nhiên về is what it means to be astonished. Her name was Đông Xưa, ancient winter, but at home she's Bebe. There was such speed in her little body and such lightness in her footfall, it is no wonder her brown study astonishes us all. In the photo of her that hangs in my parents' house, she is always 14 months old and staring into the future. In re-education camp, he had to believe she was alive because my mother on visits took arms against her shadow. Did the memory of those days sweep over him like a leaf storm from the pages of a forgotten autumn? Lost in the margins, I'm reading the way I discourage my students from reading. But this is how we deal with death, his black pen replies. Assume there is a reason for everything, instructs a green asterisk. Then between pages 896 and 897, opened to Stevens's Sunday Morning, I pick out a newspaper clipping, small as a stamp, an old listing from the 404 Employment Ops state of Minnesota, and read, "For current job opportunities, dial 612-297-3180, answered 24 hours. When I dial, the automated female voice on the other end informs me I've reached a non-working number." So as being a grad student and interested in the legacy of the Vietnam War, trying to take a scholarly distance, but obviously it had a very personal, private resonance. And some people have their archives. They get to go study in like Paris and San Francisco. The best archive, one of the best, other than maybe DC, there's a really great Vietnam War archive in Lubbock, Texas. There's a song, Lubbock or Leave It. So this is a poem from that visit. Archive Fever. Last night, dust storms filled your sleep with blinding debris. Letters from Amarillo, the rustle of human voices, bits of Eros. Now the sun's silver disk begins its slow roll across the sky like an epic hubcap. In the cracked and blazing lot, you stand like a sundial, searching for that good shirt you wear like someone else's life. And speaking of other lives, this poem is about poets' lives. To procrastinate from writing my dissertation, and I embarked on a Wikipedia, or a sort of Wikipedia project with this other poet named Lyndon, who to like write entries for Vietnamese poets. So this is kind of like a mashup of entries we wrote and stuff we didn't write, and lives of the Vietnamese poets. And you can substitute your own poets and traditions. Lives of the Vietnamese poets. Early on in his career, this poet wrote patriotic poems inspiring youth to premature but glorious dreams, deaths. This poet was one of the first of his countrymen to cut his hair short and adopt barbarian clothing and habits of speech. This poet spent 3 months in jail where he failed to commit suicide. A reluctant survivor, he committed his poems to memory. By his own admission, this poet became brilliantly mad. He was, by all accounts, the closest to a beatnik our country has ever produced. To this poet, a finished poem is a corpse, a published poem, a mummy. Favorite themes, romantic love, alcohol, and opium. This poet was also a collector of jokes, many of them bawdy. As critics have observed, this poet's poems, profane, obscene, and silly, appear to be written by a 5-year-old or illiterate drunk. This poet went from a somebody to a nobody, and then back to a somebody nobody read. This poet died in a neighboring country of malaria while on a gold-digging expedition to escape from debts. This poet introduced a cleaner, starker music into verse and was the first to write about jazz. Forgotten by all but a few, he escaped overseas. This poet became obsessed with phantoms, penning classics such as Phantom Spring, Adventures of Phantom, Village of Phantoms, and My Life as a Phantom. This poet is the author of one unfinished historical novel and over 100 unwritten poems. All right, I'll read a A poem about this poet, a self-portrait. It was a long time ago, written in my early 30s. Self-portrait with new weapons systems. You used to be 30, now you're something. Treat yourself. Fragrances, massages, mimosas, and fine leather goods. This year, let's try not to kill our plants again. My voicemail called to tell me I'm running out of memory. At the scene of Gaddafi's capture, a Yankees cap. I reserve the right to unlike this. On a scale of 1 to 10, her blouse forgets nothing. A text declares, I'm here. Yesterday is my alibi. The sky 5 minutes before midnight. Suddenly everyone is talking about unicorns. At least you share a birthday with Snoop Dogg. That recent post on drones was a real downer. Your morals will be supported. The new hummingbirds will buzz into rooms, drop a payload, and leave. A scar invited a touch. Apply gentle pressure when breaking. Do something painful each day, like brushing your teeth. Air the night collected cools these rooms. The brass is already talking about future engagements. I'm a little bit happier than I was a moment ago. Hold steady while I take the temperature of your voice. You cannot doubt the lemon cake. The Eurozone is really just Sarkozy and Merkel. Sometimes Cameron will throw his 2 cents in. We talk of our lives as if we were others. With an ear to the air, the birds have organized. Considerable cloudiness with occasional rain showers. When I say tomorrow, I mean an expression of regret. Today is nothing like 1980. Let's put the future behind us. I'll walk you just as far as this thought. Oh, that poem feels dated for some, like Gaddafi. Who's Sarkozy? Who's Merkel? Cameron? Who's that guy? Who am I? Maybe a couple, just 2 more poems from this book. Osprey. So I did write poems about birds before I wrote poems about birds. This one is called Osprey. Swelling out of the ocean like a bad feeling, heard before seen, slouching towards Miramar over Venice Beach. It's the Bell Boeing V-22, not sleek but versatile, able to launch from El Asad, fly to Mudiisis, perform pickup, then return, all within the golden hour. Fast enough to outrun a difficult pass, the budgetary hurdles and crashes in R&D, the $72 million price tag, flyaway, its many modes, and we think moods. You remember its namesake in another state, fled from some outer dark, gliding above the diamond, from left field to center, where it made its home up in the stadium lights, a crown of wooden swords for its nest, hovering in the swampy air like forethought, as the crack of a bat sent a tiny moon into orbit, a wave rippling through the crowd, the lights on their tall stems powered on, day powered down, and you had no team. You did not know whom to root for, home or away. Warning, trigger warning, I may sing in this one. It's called My Viet Cong. And it's the last poem I read from your reenactments. At the bookstore where we like to go, my lover finds me an almanac of the war, knowing all about my obsessions. Viet Cong was a derogatory term for Vietnamese communists in the South. Instructed by Hanoi to lie low until 1959, they were activated by the North Vietnamese Politburo to begin a guerrilla war in the South in an attempt to subvert and overthrow. Viet Cong was also the name of this post-punk band from Calgary. They sound like lasers drilling into ice, winters in Wisconsin, my heart's furnace. The sound that begins Viet Cong resembles someone trying to punch their way out of a coffin, according to Pitchfork.com. In Saigon once, my grandmother's caretaker silently clapped her hands over her ears, mouthing, "Bomb, bomb, bomb." 3 was what everyone called her. Bomb was the only English word I heard Baba speak. When 3 was a girl, the sky opened up with rolling thunder so loud she became partially deaf. War loaned her the word. My nickname, Bum, when you say it, sounds like a little bomb. My American classmates couldn't say it right, so I became Boom. But I was talking about Viet Cong. The band came under attack for not knowing 2 syllables could trigger such a grim history. During rehearsal, the bassist aimed his guitar like a machine gun. "All you need is a rice paddy and straw hat," the drummer shouted. "That would be so Viet Cong." Their new name is Preoccupations. As a kid, I watched every single Vietnam War movie. Apocalypse Now, The Deer Hunter, Full Metal Jacket, Platoon, you name it. I was too young to realize I was after my own face on the NVA soldiers and VC guerrillas. I hummed along as King, the black soldier, played by Keith David, sang low, "I come from Alabama with my banjo on my knee, and I'm going to Louisiana, for my true love for to see. Oh, Susanna." Back then, I didn't know they shot the war in the Philippines. Mount Makiling for jungle scenes, Cavite for river and village scenes, or that Vietnamese refugees were hired to act various roles like VC. About the worst thing my parents can call anyone is Viet Cong. It's been years since anyone called me Kami or Gook or Chink. One was Kevin, the other Steve, both redheads. On the school bus home, Kevin slurred, "Go back to your country." My friend Sean saved me that day from a black eye. If you're wondering, I come from the Midwest of everywhere. Hai Dung means lighthouse. Like the painter in the novel, I have had my vision. A visible signal of safe harbor or mark of danger. Call me mariner, or renegade, or outcast. My lover and I have names for each other we keep like secrets. Once upon a time, there was a man who, freed from one prison, found himself released into a still vaster prison. Inside, he was determined to escape, but first had to devise a plan, come up with an alias. He paid for fake ID, pretended to be secretly Viet Cong, and if they asked him for his name, he'd give them mine. Earlier today on a translation panel, we talked about poets we translate, and I'd like to honor the translators and translation and the role of translation that the translation plays in our lives as poets, and to read a few poems from Phan Hao. And I had said one of the things about translation is that it lets you be a different poet. So imagine me as a Vietnamese poet who lives in America, an American poet who writes in Vietnamese, older, about 13 years, instead of having arrived, resettled in the U.S. before the age of 2, coming to the U.S. at the age of 24. and also a poet who lives in the great state of Illinois. Not in Chicago, but in northern Illinois, who's a research librarian at Northern Illinois University. Conducts his life in English, but writes poems in Vietnamese. Paper bells. The paper bells hanging from the ceiling make no sound. Summer has begun. I stand naked in the afternoon in the middle of the yard, watching my shadow flowing like ink from my feet, a piece of night. A one-story house holding 60,000 gallons of gasoline. My head is aflame, throwing open the door to each blaze. My spirit can't take flight. The paper bells make no sound. Saturday, May 10th, 1998. Saturday morning, May 10th, 1998. Nothing special, really. The birthday of thousands of people, not me. Nothing special, really. Some whales wash ashore dead. I open a can of sardines. Fish without heads think in silence. I open my hand. The lines on my palm tell me it's not time. It's not time to die yet. I open Walt Whitman, leaves of grass still lush in the middle of a haughty smile. I spread your legs wide open. A sad creature is born. I open the door of morning. It's already past 10. Saturday morning. Nothing special really, except I'm short of 25 cents for laundry. Manufacturing poetry. On an afternoon with nothing to do, I sit manufacturing poems out of 16 screws, 2 metal plates, and 4 wheels. Poems fueled by a mix of strife, hope, love, and futility. Enough to run from America to China in a pitch-black tunnel bisecting the Earth's core. Blasting open fate, I tunnel deep. Meeting a cab driver in New York. The yellow cab runs on roads ripped open by earthquakes never sealed. Above our heads, skyscrapers swerve. Nguyen Van Bie has lived in New York for 28 years. He's still not fluent in English. His French is better. Robbed 3 times at gunpoint, B says, anything worth losing, I've already lost. Country, youth, dreams. Back in Saigon, my family had 2 servants and 1 chauffeur. Now I'm the chauffeur of millions of people. In this city, you catch a cab by whistling. Just wave your hand, I'll run up to you like a yellow dog called taxi. Don't worry, no need to tip me. We're both Vietnamese, after all. And this is a found, a found poem that Hao, the poet, took language from an email from another poet in Vietnam that they were corresponding. So it dies like a Vietnamese, like a poet in Illinois speaking to a poet in Saigon who had just been to Dalat. Email from Nguyen Quoc Chan. Been in Dalat a week already. Saigon was too hot, hotter than years past. I'm more afraid of people every day. Even the grass and trees look a little fried. Rained here yesterday. Black clouds filled the sky, and flies coated the ground. Inside a pho joint, I asked someone, what's up with all the flies? He said, it's fly season. Cheers. I really do encourage you to check out Phan Yun Hao's work and embrace him as an Illinois poet. One of the strange things that happened during the pandemic, I'm grateful for my health and people I love, their health, and didn't write much. But I became a birder. I walked and looked for birds and learned how to see again. And at some point, I was reorienting myself. So, and after this first book, and which is sort of oriented towards the past and trying to make the past present and the legacy of the war, I really desperately needed to be in the present and anchor myself, and so that was one way, and learning how to do that in poetry. This poem is part of a new manuscript. I'm not sure what to call it. My Ornithology or Sky Excavation. It's after the artist Jen Bervin, their installation called River. It was like a scale installation of the Mississippi River on the wall, and I saw it in Des Moines, Iowa, where I lived and grew up. Or not grew up, but I lived there for a while. And I crossed the Mississippi a whole lot growing up. So it's one of my rivers. River to river. Apologies to Iowa Public Radio. River to river. River spidering across the wall, sailing through the air. River flashing with silver sequins fastened to sunbeams. River always in pieces, a torn ribbon streaming everywhere. River carving out a canyon through the years, seen from a sudden grassy overlook, an old bridge, a new shoreline, endlessly crossing and recrossing our lives. River this winter with 16 eagles alert and searching. River unfrozen and pooling around the ankles of trees in springtime, daring us closer. River asleep inside the black night like a spent lover, dreaming of being a chandelier of rain, first velvet wet drops on bare skin. Go on. Conveyor belt of clouds, destroyer and preserver of towns, longest breath of the earth. Tell us what floating means to you. Some trees are weeping, river. Speak of all you carry and carry off in river song and river silence. Be horse, be fairy, carry us from now to next too. River, I'm done with fading shadows. Give me daylight, broken and scattered across your fluid, transparent face. Come meet me with the moon and the stars running and tumbling along your sides. River swinging open like a gate to the sea. Times, no calendar of months, you say, but water in the aftermath of light. Your drifting cargo tells us everything arrives from far away and long ago and ends in the body. Boat of heartache and ecstasy we pilot, in quest of passage also. River we call Mississippi or Mekong. Sing us forth to nowhere but here, with your perfect memory, be our flood. From the pines. I miss the toad, W.S. Merwin. And I miss the warbler who visited all March, the suet feeder hanging below the colorful nimbus of the Japanese magnolia that originated in 1820 as a chance seedling in the garden of a French nurseryman, and after an unlikely journey now flowers always early spring in Georgia, before cherry blossom and dogwood, pink flames on gray spreading branches to blaze at the heart of my mother's backyard. The pine warbler sang a simple mellow trill from rose dawn to lilac dusk as he sallied forth on his daily rounds, aloft in evergreen clouds of needle clusters and cones, surfing the treetops unseen but close, until he would remember that cake of melted fat and seeds someone kept perpetually stocked, floating in the garden of exotics, thriving among native shade, then would sail down again, like a stray sunray from the pines, like a strange yellow bloom, to eat quickly and lustily, gazing upon the incandescent petals, before he poured out, body shaking as a wind-struck leaf, the sounds he reserved for such occasions, a rapid surging variation on the voyage to spring, on the perils of flying, on the architecture of trees, on the generations of air, on the geography of shadows, on the pleasures of pine light, on the loneliness of storms, on the dreams of pollen, until all was forgotten of our hunger and our desires. All right, so there's no such thing as a seagull. Birds are real, but there's no such thing as a seagull. The correct term is just gull because they're not exclusive to the sea. And in Iowa, along the Mississippi Flyway, we actually get tons of gulls. Marsh song. That's not going to help you for cocktail parties or anything, but that's something you should know. Names. You won't be around to see it disappear into the estuary and tidal flow, breakwater broken before the future's final pier. For now is enough, skulking among the refuse, where cattails rollick yet with wren song and mud claims your long ago and ever after. Wander side by side with the gull who makes a home of anywhere and knows a trick to crack a shell, rising, hovering, falling over this refuge, wasteland, wetland. Keep looking until you forget whatever brought you way out here. I usually keep to where I live, the upper Midwest, birding, traveling. I like exploring what's close. But I did have an incredible chance to go to the Yucatan to travel, and now that where I travel, instead of looking for good places to eat and drink, look for birding places in the U.S. and elsewhere. The seed and the thrush. 1. I heard this one from Miguel Amar Uribe, who heard it from a man named Gerardo one afternoon in the jungle at Punta Laguna. They had been gazing up into the canopy at the languorous spider monkeys when Miguel sensed an avian presence on the forest floor before them and saw the gray-brown dusky profile standing upright, a terracotta robin. It was just another clay-colored thrush. Because the man he stood next to was Maya, and because it was part of his philosophy and his daily bread as a local guide to know all about birds, he turned to Gerardo and asked if he knew this bird's name in Yucatec. We call it Jukuk, Miguel relayed in English. The name opened up a door inside Gerardo, and out flew the story his grandfather once told him about the seed and the thrush. 2. When you plant a seed, the seed is afraid, Miguel began in the voice of the grandfather. Here his swift hands dug into the air to show the open palm of the earth receiving the seed, meant to root, to leaf, to radiate. Next, he gave voice to the child sitting before the elder. But how can a seed be afraid? Young Gerardo thinks this is just another fable. It is understood that we are the child who, faced with the unthinkable, must listen, because it is dark in the underworld. Then Miguel extemporized on the cosmos. In the world of the sun, we had been walking around Muyil when thrush song lit up from the dripping shadows of an orchard. Jukuk thrust a melody upon the earth, and the song seeped into the ground like rain. Varied, rich phrases my guidebook describes as Rio, Ri, Ori and Kliu. Down in that place of fright, the light-drenched notes of Chikuk kept the seed company. Encouraged and comforted by this voice, the seed glistened and germinated. And here my friend fell silent again as he turned to see with his ears the other bird we were looking for that rainy morning when we saw the one called Chikuk. 3. Everything I saw that morning on earth I was seeing for the first time. Green jay wearing the jungle on its back, the sky on its head, and the night around its throat ringing with bells. Bees assembling a volcano, and butterflies scattering starlight. Hands humming above a stone wheel above a pyramid on fire. Sweet, unending communication of bewilderment. Fleeing shadow who sang me to whirl. Whirled in the marble of its red eyes. This summer I'm very excited. I am traveling to Vietnam for 6 weeks to go bird watching. Bird watching in many ways has helped me feel connected to place, my county, my town, Wisconsin, Upper Midwest, Iowa, sense of belonging. The birds don't really question you. And you get to know a place in a particular moment, but also have a sense of deep time. And so I thought, like, if birds help me feel a sense of great belonging in America, which is sometimes hard to come by, at least my own personal experience, I thought maybe if I go to Vietnam and look for birds with people who love them, Vietnamese guides, I could get to know the country of my birth through its birds and the place. But one of the things about birding is you do a lot of research, and I do research for my other poems, but before you see a bird, you envision it, and you listen to it, and you see it, so you practice seeing it. And so this is a bit of translation to this. The source text of this is a trip report by a Vietnamese birder, some of the languages from there, and my own adaptation. And it's about finding a bird that's rare, endemic to this area where I actually grew up. So I've never seen this bird, but I'm seeing it through this person's eyes, and they're going to be one of the guides. Canto for the chestnut-eared laughing thrush. And then rushed into the embrace of the mountains of the Kuntum Plateau, ferried through Lo So Pass, blew past Mang Den, dizzied among hairpin turns, floating in the lushness 1,200 meters above sea level, amid a mosaic of prime evergreen, gasping. And up there we saw strata of emerald forms, of beech, laurel, magnolia, heather, myrtle. Under unbroken canopy, in the undergrowth of that species-rich upper montane wet forest, hidden somewhere in that mystery must be our very own chestnut-eared laughing thrush. Garrulax concanesis was our day's journey and query, who appeared in our dreams calling. So we began our search, checked known locations. At the first spot, magpies, the next, babblers. But we kept looking, listening, knowing the forest gives up its secrets slowly, and passion we knew from experience associates with wild patience. On our lips, the other name, Gui Konga Kin, for the shy terrestrial bird who has no need for names, but sustenance and song. Then came a rasping buzz. Close by us, there in the undergrowth, a voice signed among the trees. A few turns of the kaleidoscope, new shapes and colors rearranged themselves into the winged creature we sought out. Brown and black dappled, spotted and speckled, the chestnut patch brushed behind the knowing eye, blurring well into the daylight world of shadows. As if a slight breeze stirred, gentle movements among the leaves and branches told us our bird retreated out of sight. We all breathed again. the laughing thrush exists. The mountain forest exists. This was only prelude, for we struck deeper into the interior, seeking greater clarity, closer listening. And so we stood like trees, staring back into the trees, ears peering through the green abundance, touching the colorful cacophony of sounds. Reader, desire follows you into the field where what you want colors what you see. On the road back to Pleiku, looking out across the highlands that held us, we all smiled. There was no need for words. Each replayed in their mind's eye the day's loveliness. Then came news of extinction. The Javan rhino dead, the last of his kind found slaughtered at Gatdiang, horn sawed off. Joy fell from the sky. Let us not tell our children a story that begins, once in the forest there was a laughing thrush. We had met with chestnut-eared laughing thrush again and again. There in the heart of the forest, there where our fellow humans had not cleared, hunted, trapped, and defoliated life out of existence. There, sweet thrush-like notes may stream yet as water over rows of stones. Others there sang the songs of their species too, and our bodies also lighter with laughter. I'll end with one more poem on some paintings by Julie Merutu, whose work I had never known. She's famous, but had an exhibit at Grinnell College where I work, and I was just asked to write a poem, and it's pretty awesome to just encounter something, a work of art, an artist unmediated. So this is a poem that came out of that encounter. Sky excavation. It's like the sky. It's like the sky torn to pieces of blue, green, red, yellow, pink, raining light, raining lines. Walk around in them. You get soaked with sensory data as an ambler in the city, its deluge of signs and sounds. It's not exactly a landscape. I don't paint places. I'm a painter of displacement, of placelessness. For me, abstraction is the name of this in-between place where I like to go and spend a lot of time looking, just looking and sorting out, feeling my way through and into a painting, its layers, shapes, directions. That's why cities and architecture, weather and tattoos, that's why accumulation and erasure and excavation, why mark, trace, scrape, sand, rub, and color. It can take years to resolve into what you see here, sometimes a month, quite possibly never, maybe sooner than you think. The erasure is the action. What do you see? I see the ghosts of buildings from Baghdad, New York, Cairo. It's not important for you to know the references, nor the statues of peaceful gods dwelling inside caves, now blasted, stolen, and removed, but not from memory. It's a hard thing to erase a trail. You can recover a lot of information if you just stay at it. The question is, how do you paint the image of absence? It's like an angel, this painting. An angel I once saw in a black and white movie. An angel in a trench coat perched atop a skyscraper, eavesdropping on the sea of human voices below. The angel seemed terribly moved, but I don't recall seeing tears or what the people said to each other or alone to themselves, in what tongues, in which country they spoke to move the angel, my angel, so much he decided to fall, to become human, to stand before, above, inside, and beside a vast and changing work called Untitled, Rogue Ascension, Entropia circulation, diffraction, local calm refuge, the millionth sequel of people on Sunday. This painting is not a description. I want you to feel it. Please have a visceral reaction. Orient yourself in the shape of arrows, in the image of leaps. Come closer. Now step back. I can't, won't spell it out. Become nobody, nowhere, and nothing. This painting is like a species of refuge we think of when it rains. Into these ruins we run. You are always invited. I don't know where I'm going when I'm setting out. It's like a walk in the park, this painting. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.